What is up? White Lightning 530 coming to you with a quick little video here on how to benchmark in Black Ops 6. You won't find it over here in Warzone anymore. There used to be a benchmark, but right now there is still a benchmark. So you can benchmark your PC and you can check your settings. A lot of people talking about changing a bunch of settings. They want to get away from NVIDIA DLSS. They want to go over to Fidelity Cache. They want to change all sorts of resolutions and all sorts of stuff like that. Now, what I've done in this particular video, we're going to talk about the settings that I've chosen and why I've chosen them. So first we'll jump into the benchmark and I'll show you what the benchmark looks like. We'll go to the settings that everyone is recommending. We'll see if the benchmark's any better or not. And we'll discuss why that happened. So in order to benchmark, you're going to go over here to Call of Duty Black Ops 6. The benchmark is only available in multiplayer. So you're going to go over to multiplayer. You're going to go over to your settings over here, down to graphics. And then over here, you can see the benchmark settings. Now, I'm first going to show you some of the settings that I'm already running, just so that you guys can have a look at that. Essentially, what I've done is I've gone into NVIDIA and I've downloaded the driver and I've optimized my PC. And since I've done that, I have had a pretty good time with frame rates and that kind of thing. There are some settings, though, that it changes that I think are a little bit better, that if you modify the settings just a little bit, it's going to improve. And then we're going to show you that benchmark and we're going to change to the settings that other streamers and PC users are recommending, and we'll see if it's better or worse. There's also some recommendations on whether or not you should change things in the game startup file, like how many cores your GPU and your CPU has. So I tell you to go and have a look at how many cores there and then change the file. We'll talk a little bit about that. So first and foremost, after optimizing, one of the things that it's going to show over here is going to be full screen borderless. We want to go to full screen exclusive. It's just going to let us run the full native resolution. The native resolution is going to be set over here, and we're running 1080p. And make sure that your refresh rate is set to the correct refresh rate. Sometimes by default it'll go to the lowest setting that your monitor will allow. Mine is normally 60 or 240, and I did find that this was on 60 a little bit earlier today, and I was not optimized and getting the best frames out of my PC that way. So when you look at this 240 Hertz refresh rate, that means that my screen can refresh 240 times a second, and it's going to be doing it at a 0.03 milliseconds. That's what my particular monitor does. Different monitors do different things. You want to make sure that you're getting the most from your monitor. Otherwise, when you go over 60 Hertz, which is 60 frames a second, which my PC is generally running between about 100 and 140 frames a second, you're literally just not going to see those frames. The game's not going to feel as smooth, and it's not going to feel as fast. It's not going to record as well down to your streaming platform and all that kind of good stuff. So make sure you're running full screen exclusive, and make sure that you're running over here 240 Hertz if you have that. Otherwise, it's very common to see 144 Hertz, but make sure it's not on a lower setting. So down the rest over here, pretty much we haven't touched very much. Under Eco Pre-Mode set, I have gone and I've customized that. That is just through basically playing with my settings here. What I've played with in the settings is the gameplay frame limit is set to 300, which is as high as it can go. And then when it comes to the menu custom frame limits, I've set them down just a little bit because the GPUs are going to be working very hard, and generally they get quite hot. So when you come out of the game, when you're not rendering as much and when you're not competing, I've set those down so that I can cool the temperatures down. So with that being said, we also have over here pause game rendering on, so that that's not going in and out of the Optimus mode or away from the Optimus mode. It's staying on discrete graphics, and that'll allow us to get the best from the system as we go through the game. Focus mode, okay, cool stuff. So quality, let's have a look at some of my settings. Mine is going to be set to custom. And over here, as you can see, there's a couple of settings. I'm actually running NVIDIA DLSS right now, despite the fact that most people say that you should be running this Fidelity FX CAS. We're going to go ahead and run it with these settings in just a second. There is one over here that I will change, which is going to be the VRAM target. I didn't know that that one was down, and that will allow us to run a little bit more of the 12 gigabytes that I have on my particular graphics card. If you have less, of course, it's going to target for that, but you want to make sure that you're using all of your resources. The reason why some people might set this a little bit lower is so that if you do overload the GPU in some particular way, reason or form, then it's not going to jitter. But of course, when you're shooting at 90, then you're going to be getting 90%. You still have 10% left over in order to be able to overload the GPU with incoming assets and things like that on the game. Now, some people are making comments that you should go into the game startup file and that you should change this to 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0 in order to get more from your game assets and more from the game performance. We'll discuss that again in the end. So let's have a look at some of the settings that I'm running just so that you guys can see, and maybe if you would like to, you can go ahead and mimic the same settings. I'm running on a RTX 4080 mobile, so I'm on a laptop, and I have a WQHD screen, which has basically is it's a non-LED, just a normal HD screen, nothing special, but sure does perform very well for the game. So I am running a Intel Core i9, just to give you an idea, and I did update my RAM. They say that you only need 32 gigabytes of RAM. I was having some issues with the game, and when I updated my RAM with the same refresh rate and megahertz on the DDR5 RAM, I went up to 64 gigabytes, even though the game says that it doesn't use that much. Of course, your operating system and so on is also using some of the resources. So as you sit in your Windows operating system, some of those resources are being taken and the game's not able to get to its maximum 32 gigabytes of RAM. So yes, your RAM update is going to help you just a little bit on the hardware side. Let's have a look at some of the settings. As you can see, high, ultra, depth of field high. Okay, I'm just showing you these settings as we go down. On-demand texture streaming. Now I have a very good internet connection over here. This is one of the things that can affect you as well. I'm hardwired. I've tested this on Wi-Fi and also have had no problems whatsoever. But this is one of the settings here where you can actually turn this off so that you can go to minimal or off, and you can change that setting for the on-demand texture streaming. And by doing that, you will avoid downloading certain textures whilst you're in the game and playing. These are textures that are not on your local PC. I don't know why they do that. Many PCs have quite a large area through which they can store textures as well as additional data. Maybe it's for the consoles because they want to limit how large the install is. Of course, we have a lot of complaints as to how large the install is. So maybe that is why there. Okay, so allocated cache size. All of this is by default, so don't worry about that. And again, I have optimized this through NVIDIA, through the NVIDIA app, and I've selected, I'll show you in just a second how to do that after we do the benchmarks. So here are the rest of my settings: tessellation high, volumetric quality, and the quality of my game, as you can see in my streams, are pretty, I would say it's pretty good. I would say it looks damn near the 4K resolution when I try to run it and have a look at what the game looks like there. Let's look at the view. Okay, these are some settings that you can change in order to change the way that your gameplay works, and will definitely improve how your game feels and the amount of visual recoil that you might see and are not truly experiencing in the game. So motion reduction presets, I turn that off. Arachnophobia mode, that is for your zombies game over there. FOV, you want to turn this up as high as possible. I just like mine a little bit lower at that 117. So that means over here, as you can see, 60 degrees FOV. It's the degrees of field of view. 80 degrees is a little bit wider. It's 10 degrees wider on either side. 100 degrees is another 10 degrees wider on each side. And 120 is another couple of degrees wider on each side. So as you can see over here, the 120 FOV you can see by far the most, and it looks the most natural, but at the same time it's going to be demanding a lot more from your GPU and from your CPU because it's got a much larger area that it needs to render in the game. However, as you can see over here, this guy's got tunnel vision. All he can see right now is straight down this tunnel over here. He can't see any enemies in this periphery vision at all. And that is, of course, something that helps you with spatial awareness. So I do recommend pushing this up as high as you physically can on your system until it starts having issues. I believe I had it at 120, and I originally turned it down because I was having some issues with frame rate, and I just shaved that down to 117, and I got used to it there, and I like it, so I kept it. ADS field of view affected. Weapon field blur wide. Okay, third person view doesn't matter because we're not going to use that. Vehicle field view, you can choose over here between narrow, default, and wide. And again, the wide is going to give you a much wider view. and is going to give you more spatial awareness, where you can see where you can drive as well as where you can see enemies. But of course you might have some graphics issues. I think that's why it's set to a little bit lower generally as a default, which is going to be for the console players, and it carries over to PC as well. Weapon motion blur off and world motion blur off and weapon motion blur off, and that is just going to give you a crisper image. As you can see there, it's going to look a lot more like this as opposed to like this. I prefer to see a clean, crisp image all the time. And then what we're going to do is for the camera movement, we're going to reduce that to least. It's normally over here, I think the default is 100%, and this one also defaults 100%, and that means that your camera and your player is moving around from that center frame a lot more. For streaming, it doesn't look very good because it looks like the camera is moving around, which people dislike. But also for gameplay and for your experience and for what you see, it's going to be a little bit less difficult to aim down sights and hit your targets, as well as play from hipfire if you have these cameras moving around as little as possible. And then the last three settings don't really matter because they're for third person and inverted flashbang. Just really up to you if you want to run that or not. It means your screen goes black instead of white. If you're sitting in a dark room, that might be a little bit better for you, so that you're not actually flashbanged by your own equipment, essentially by your screen. Alright, so now that we've run through all of the settings, I'm going to go ahead, we're going to run the benchmark, and once we've run the benchmark, we're going to go ahead and see what it says and see where we're at, and we're going to change to some of the settings that they absolutely recommend, they say is an absolute must to have, and then we're going to benchmark again. So let's have a look at that now. Benchmark tool, let's go. Alright, they want you to close any other software, they want to make sure that you have the latest graphics and drivers. I do. And they want to make sure that you're experimenting with upscaling and sharpening solutions, and that you adjust your graphics settings to run as a benchmark tool to see the performance in the background. Excellent. Let's start and let's see what it looks like. It'll just drop in what this is. It is a mode through which it is going to give you an exact timed sequence of events, be it flashbangs and fires of weapons that wouldn't otherwise be able to be replicated in a gameplay scenario, and it's going to give you an idea of how well your GPU and CPU is doing and what the load is on that. I haven't seen this one, so I'm just going to let it play out and we'll see what the results are. I'll take a picture of it when we're done. The FPS and the CPU and GPU milliseconds, as well as the server latency, is showing at the bottom there. So these are the performance stats, and at the end it's going to give us a summary of that. In the different modes and different areas, we're going to do different demands, like this is close demand and fire, explosions, smoke. And in a second when we come back, we're going to go ahead and benchmark again with the different settings. Notice it's made the exact same thing, like replicates and play it over and over with lots of different there is your far away tessellation and rendering resolution, and that's zone 5 finished. Alright, so let's get a picture of that. Very low on the RAM usage. Let's get a picture of that right now. Alrighty, perfect. So as you can see over here, our RAM usage is only showing about 8.55 gigabytes. Like I said, interestingly enough, when I was running only 32 gigabytes, I was starting to have some issues with that, and I was starting to have some issues with the heat as well on the PC. So the estimated VRAM usage, we're very close to our target over there. As you can see, I've got about 12 gigabytes of RAM, and we're running at about 11.22, the target right there. Sometimes in the game, certain things will happen very quickly, like multiple explosions, flashbangs, fire, weapon smoke, all that kind of thing that can push a little bit more frames or a little bit more rendering demand onto your GPU, and that might push you over, and that's why that 90% is that target, and we have the additional left over there that we can run without having any issues or clipping. Our average FPS was 159, our lowest was 135, and our lowest was 110, and this is on the GPU side. The CPU runs its own thing, so they actually have different tests for your CPU and GPU. So let's look at the zone details, and I'll get a picture of that as well. And then we'll go over to some of the settings that people say that you should change. We'll see if that is better or worse. All right, so let's drop back over here. We will leave the benchmark tool. And we're going to go over here. We're going to go to graphics. And now we're going to talk about some of the settings that you see a lot of videos out there. And everyone swears that this is going to make it absolutely better for you. So the question is, does it or does it not? Over here, they do recommend that you go to full screen exclusive. I am running that. They do recommend that you run 1080p or that you run 1440 if you want to run that. The reason why this isn't changing over here is because we need to go over here into graphics preset. You can set it to recommended if you want to. I will tell you that the recommendation from the game is different from the recommendation of NVIDIA drivers, and that I have tested the recommendations from the game, which I disliked, and originally I was seeking those videos that told us to go and change a bunch of our settings, and these are the settings that they told us to change. Now if you change over to Fidelity CAS, it's going to allow you to change some of the settings over here that we weren't able to change just a minute ago. That's going to allow you to get to those different resolutions. There's your 1440p if you want to, and there's 4K if you want to run that there. For the sake of this argument over here, we're going to leave the resolution exactly the same so that there's no question about it, that the settings that we're going to change over here in the quality and in the view is going to be actually what affects us. So let's have a look over here. If we go to Fidelity CAS, everyone says that you should go ahead and set that to 100 so that you're getting a true 1080p. Dynamic resolution is off at that point, and you're going to be getting the exact rendering and upscaling over here. The CAS strength, everyone tells us to set it to about 2. And when I say everyone, there's a lot of streamers, there's a lot of benchmarks on PCs, a lot of benchmarks on previous Warzone. I've watched a lot of content on this kind of stuff, and being someone that was trying to get the most performance out of my PC, I was also trying to squeeze every ounce of performance out, and I thought that I would definitely get more frame rate and do better that way. Alright, so let's go over here. Frame generation is off now. So DLSS is your dynamic latency. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's frame generation essentially. And people say that by turning that off, you're seeing what the game is actually showing you, and it's not smoothing the game out. However, I have not found any difficulties with DLSS frame generation myself, and I've actually quite enjoyed it. So we're going to leave all of these settings exactly the same so that we can see that it's not the settings that are making the difference. We want to have a look at Fidelity CAS, the sharpening, and going up to the exact 1080p. And again, we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave all of these settings exactly the same over here so we can see what effect this particularly has on the benchmark right now. Alrighty, so we're going to wait, and it's going to just unlock over here in just a second. This is our previous settings and everything that we just saw just a second ago. As you saw, it's exactly the same, and now we are ready to go and render again. Exactly the same thing is going to happen. We're going to drop into the game. It's going to play the same sequence of events, and when we come out, we'll be able to see whether or not it was better or worse. So I'll go ahead and I'll pull these I'll pull the image up right now so we can have a look at that. So it looks like right off the bat we're actually a little bit lower on the FPS, and to me the game is looking just a little bit more pixelated. I think that's because of the DLSS frame sharpening that we're using, and we're actually at a higher resolution here. We run a lower resolution on the DLSS from NVIDIA optimization, and then it basically sharpens and scales the image for you. For me, this is much more noticeable 1080p. It might just be a placebo effect that I'm having here. It looks better on the other side. And that's zone 5 finished. Let's see. And as you can see, substantially worsened, and not only in terms of the resolution, which has actually been improved. We went to full 1080p there, and we were actually running something by 711 pixels in the other mode. I'll show you again when we go back what those settings are. But if we look at the GPU average FPS, we were at 159, now we're at 115. That's quite a big drop. We were at the low fifth was 135, now we're at 96. The low first was 110, and now we're at 84. And then let's have a look at the CPU, if the CPU actually got any better. The CPU did actually get a little bit better, but when you're in the game, the GPU is going to be rendering your images, so it doesn't really matter what it's doing over here, but we will have a look at that. With regards to the average FPS, we had 115 previously, now we're 121, so it's marginally better, about 6 frames a second better. We were at a low fifth of 103, and now we're at 108. We were at a low first of a 96, and now we're at 104. So we're seeing about a 5% increase there, but we're seeing about a 40% decrease on the GPU side, and that's obviously something that I'm going to be noticing myself. So with regards to that, I just want to get a picture of this so that we can show it in the video, so that I can reference it myself as well. So if we have a look at the estimated VRAM usage, it is substantially less, despite the fact that we actually increased the resolution up to 1080p from the dynamic resolution that we had before. So previously we were running at, we saw it was close to the 90%, and it was optimized. We were running at about 1.22 gigabytes, and now we're all the way down to 4.89. It's not really using the resources of the PC very much. And on the RAM, we're running about 20.1 gigabytes, whereas previously we were running 21.66 gigabytes. So maybe that was a different version of the game that I was experiencing there that was causing me some kind of RAM demand, and we're not seeing it here. Let's have a look over here at the zones themselves, and I'm just going to pull this up for the zones. Okay, so previously I didn't actually click through that, so we're only going to be able to see zone over here. The global result previously was 114 frames per second, and now is 109 frames per second. The low fifth was 97 frames per second, and now we have 90 frames a second. And the low first was 82 frames a second, and now we have 78 frames a second. The server latency was actually a little bit more on this one as well. It was 25 milliseconds. It's flashing there. It's flashing through the different zones. It's showing live latency. So it was 24 milliseconds previously. That's our internet connection, so that's going to be the same. The packet loss was 0%. Alright guys, so let's have a chat about those video files that a lot of people are recommending that you edit. So I did try a couple of those video files, and I find that for the edits that they want you to go from the 0.09 up to a 1.2 or a 1.4, what that's going to push your GPU to 120 or 140% of its assets and so on. For me, I tried this with both the CPU, counting the number of cores and putting in the right values, as well as the GPU. It made things substantially worse. Again, like I said, there's a lot of videos out there that are telling you to optimize certain things, that are telling you to do certain things to your PC. We benchmarked it here today, and you can see it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. So with that being said, how do you optimize your PC? So I'm going to show you over here in Black Ops 6 again. It'll be the same as if you go over to Warzone. In this particular case, the video was made in multiplayer. You can do it in Warzone as well, though. It won't make a difference. Just the benchmark is only available in Black Ops 6. So we'll go back over here again. We'll go under multiplayer. What you'll do is over here, you go down to graphics. And then what you'll do is you'll come over to quality tab setting. And you're going to go over here. You're going to click on custom. And yours might say something else, and you're going to reset to recommended. I've just rechanged all of my settings and values in my PC back to what I would like them to be, as I discussed earlier in the video, so I'm not going to do it right now. But when you reset to recommended, reset for performance, not for quality. The performance is going to give you the highest frame rate, and thus is going to give you the smoothest gameplay possible. So with that being said, reset to recommended, reset for performance. So we're just going to check over here. As you can see, it did change a couple of my settings when I did that, when I optimized again. So we want to make sure that it's going to full screen exclusive. And you want to make sure that your refresh rate is the same. And as you can see over here, I'm actually running 4K, but it's a scalable resolution. So you can see the resolution is scaled over here to 71%, and it's giving me an 1818 by 1136. This is how I've re-optimized my PC with the new shaders and the settings as of today. The edits that I did yesterday was done with yesterday's settings. There must have been a patch overnight. So with that being said, that is how you optimize in the game. It does help just a little bit, but the most valuable settings that you're going to be able to optimize if you have a GeForce RTX graphics card is going to be in the app. So go over to the app. I've already opened mine up over here. And as you can see in video, there is the home where you would normally come. You come down to drivers. Make sure you're always running the latest and greatest driver. It makes a massive difference with the compatibility and with the frame rate that you're going to get. And then over here in graphics, you can then select the game or the program that you would like to use. As you can see over here, I've already optimized. There will be a button over here where it says revert. It will say optimize. Once you click that, it will inject the best settings into your game. I recommend that you basically start up the game. You go and optimize for performance. You come in here, you optimize again for performance over here, and then you reboot your PC and come back into the game and reload everything new again. And with that being said, when you come back into the game, you should get the highest frame rates possible. Good luck, guys. Thank you very much for watching my video. If it helped you at all, please give me a subscribe down below. If you have any questions, comments are welcome and I'll help you out. You guys have a lovely day. See you next time. Goodbye.